Welcome to The Conscious Investor. Let's get started. So I have lots of guests, and they are always the best guests, but then there are the best of the best. And then there's the best of the best of the best. So today, this episode, I am joined by one of the best guests I could possibly have. Eric, I am so stoked to finally, after 6 months of planning, be having you on The Conscious Investor. Welcome.
Oh, Julie, first of all, you have great guests, so I must be in good company, but thank you for that. I'll say, I don't pretend to be the best, but thank you for having me on the show. This is a true honor. I'm so excited to chat with you.
You know, so here's how I'll give everybody kind of my mental rubric, right? We met at a conference in July. Is awesome. We had real conversation, and everyone knows, like, I'm a junkie for authentic, real conversation. Like, don't give me any BS, don't give me the fluff. Like, let's have fun, which we did, but let's like have a meaningful conversation of substance that, you know, just transcends. And there we were, you know, my husband and I were at that event, and we just, you know, sit there, and I think we could have, like, the three of us could have talked all night long, probably.
And we did talk for a long time. I think the bar kicked us out. So yeah, no, I agree. It was truly, and that's the great way to say authentic. I mean, you can read through the BS at those conferences. Lots of people like to,
oh my gosh,
say a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, you can tell if someone's being honest. So we had a great conversation. Yeah, I mean, I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. Thanks for the patience for all the reschedules too. So I blame us both. It's not just me.
Yeah, because I had to reschedule also. But, you know, I think that speaks to, I always believe that the timing is always perfect. It might not be when we want it, but the timing is always perfect. I want to ask you about this. Okay, so we met, and I have a tendency to meet people everywhere I go. That's just my life. And I think that you have that shared tendency. And I think a lot of people don't have that ability to just talk to everybody. So here we are. I'm going to give a mental picture to those listening. We're at this cool bar in this really cool, you know, I didn't even know that was in a hotel. It was a whole city within itself.
And some ridiculous giant Texas-sized hotel. I know.
It was like, I'm in a city within, is this a country in Texas? I don't know. So we're sitting there at this bar, and we're sitting at the corner, and I don't know who said something first, but we start this conversation, and the conversation, obviously we've already said, at least this is lengthy conversation, but most people aren't willing to start that conversation. They are uncomfortable. So my husband was just asking me last night, he's like, I don't even know how you talk to strangers constantly. And I don't even know how you do that. So I'm wondering, you know, you've received deals, you've found deals because you talk to strangers. So no stranger danger for people like us, but people like my husband, they need to know how do you make that happen? How do you go around and talk to anybody?
I mean, that's an awesome question. And my wife's an introvert too. And so, like, when we're going to like a party, for example, like, she almost runs through her head, like, who am I going to talk to? What are some questions I can have? And I kind of like tease her for it, but I think it's kind of like a crutch. So what I would say is no planning, and also generally speaking, I mean, 95% of the time, if you just say hello to someone or be like, oh, you know, like, usually the words I use are like, I'm sorry to interrupt, or like, you know, like, you guys were talking, I was like, hey, do you mind if I jump in? I think something like that. So like, just say hello. It's the hardest step. Most times, most people want to talk, I think, and aren't like offended, right? So like, what's the downside? So if you say, hey, I'd love to talk to you. Do you mind if I jump in? Or just, hey, how's it going? I mean, truly, how's it going? No one's going to be, I mean, you could probably read someone like an airplane, like AirPods in, fine. They don't want to talk to you, you know, but generally, right, especially at conferences, people want to talk. So I would just say, like, take the leap of faith, say, how are you doing? Introduce yourself. It sounds harder than it is. It's really actually easy. And I do think most people want to talk. So awesome question.
Yeah, I think they do. And as I mentioned, this ability to talk to strangers, which, you know, I just don't think there are any strangers out there. So And they're all potential friends. They all have potential. They're not strangers. So there could be a little mindset tweak if you are, nervous. Just picture, look at the person and picture someone similar in your life. Like, oh, well, I'm just going up to so-and-so. But you're out walking your kids and you turn up deals. So this ability to be able to talk to people leads to really great opportunities. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love this story. So I will say, like, it's taken a lot of trial and error. So my kids, well, he's 4 now, but when he was a baby, like, one of my favorite things to do is just go on a walk with him. And he could see the world and like just watching through his eyes almost, like just walk around and point at stuff. And but where we live it's like downtown, right? So we can walk and see a lot of houses and there's like some small multifamily stuff. And so I'd walk by basically anytime I saw a for rent sign or for sale sign, I would just call it and just say, hey, I know you're renting. Do you mind if I ask the rental price? And 2 things happen. One would be I get to know the market a little bit better. And then 2, every rental I would ask, I'm not actually looking to rent, I'm looking to buy. Would you sell? And so this is cool. So I was walking my son down the street, saw this older gentleman sitting like in the yard. In fact, I think he was putting a for rent sign in the yard. And I asked him that question. I said, hey, how's it going? Looks like you're renting this. Do you mind if I ask the rent? And he was super nice. He's like, yeah, kind of gave me the rent number. And what's crazy, his rent number was way low, like way low. So I didn't say anything. I just said, okay, cool. Well, I'm actually looking to buy. Would you sell your property? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I guess I would for like a certain price. I mean, kind of basically saying like anything's for sale. So I was like, okay, cool. I'd be pretty interested. Think about what you want for it. And I just gave him my number and kind of left it there because I didn't want to bombard him, right? So he called me a couple days later, said, hey, we met. And I was like, yeah, of course I remember. He said $1 million for a 6-plex, which actually is about market rate where we live. And so I was like, okay, well, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, it's a lot of money for what it is, but let's like dive into this a little bit, right? So I'm like, okay, well, it seems like maybe you've owned the property for a while. I actually looked the property up on the assessor's office, so I know he didn't own it for a long time. So I said, do you owe anything on the property? Would you consider owner financing? And he was basically like, well, yeah, I've heard of that before. Like, but can you tell me about it? So he didn't really know what it was. So I just gave him like a little education. I said, hey, we can come to our own terms. We outside of realtors, and we can discuss, and essentially we can meet in the middle, right? So like a price that works for you and I, and then terms, which is super important. And so I, again, kind of like left it there. I said, think about it and let's talk again. So he called me back like the next day and he was like, okay, I think I understood. I talked to my attorney. Yeah, I'd love to do that. And I said, okay, cool. What's a monthly payment you need? And so what ended up happening basically, he told me the payment amount. And he said, I want $1 million. And he was stuck on the sales price, I could tell. So
not the terms. Like, and the deal is in the terms.
Exactly. Yes. That's so valuable. And what you just said is so important. So I was like, okay, cool. So let's do $1 million, but I'll need a super low down payment, right? Because my wife and I don't have that much cash sitting around, especially at that time. And I said, and then we'll have to figure out a low rate and a long amortization. Same thing. He'd never heard the word amortization, which is totally fine. So we ended up on a $35,000 down payment, which is 3.5% down, and a 40-year amortization. And what's crazy about this whole story was his
40-year am.
40-year, yeah. But there was a balloon, right? Because he's an older gentleman.
Wait, so 4 or 40?
40.
40.
Yep. Yeah,
that's insane.
I know. So he was like, sure. What? I mean, he was like, whatever works, because he wanted essentially the number. Like in my mind, he wanted to sell his property for $1 million, which is probably slightly overpriced. In my mind, I was thinking, how can I get the monthly payment to a place where we can cash flow this property and fix it up? And so that's exactly what we did. So we bought the property. He was actually making around, I think, slightly more from our payments than he was with rents. If you put yourself in his shoes, he's like, this is the perfect scenario. I sold my property. I don't have to be a landlord anymore, because you could tell he was just tired of it. And the other thing that I didn't mention was one of the units he wasn't renting. It was like a down unit. It was filled with stuff. So I knew right away, like, we can clean that one out, get it rented. And then he was way under market on rents. And I knew that because, of course, throughout the course, I knew the rents. So every time we got one turn, we get up to market. So we were cash flowing really well. And the thing is, again, $35,000 is a lot of money, but that's the cash it took to buy $1 million property. And more importantly, just like you said, it was just struck up from conversation. I mean, I would have never landed that deal had I not said hello to that gentleman. So that's kind of the story, to just chatting with strangers.
So there isn't stranger danger. I get it. That rings so well. And I'm trying to find something like, what could we put in instead of stranger danger that's like stranger opportunity, stranger surprises? I don't know.
We need to find, there's not a lot of words that rhyme with danger though. Like stranger,
or
arranger.
I know it doesn't. Maybe we put stranger at the end of it, but I mean, strangers are people. They are normal people that have normal problems that want solutions. And so when you're willing to just strike up the conversation, but this really falls in line with who you are, Eric. And we don't know each other like super, super deep, but we've actually had a lot of really great conversations and recently recorded on your podcast. And it was like such a great conversation. But it's like you gave him space, and a lot of people would be like, no, you got to reel that sucker in. Like, don't give him any space. He's going to get thinking and he's going to start talking to other people. So what gave you the confidence to give him the space and to say, you know what, here's this information, just think about it. Call me back when you're ready.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There's a lot of sales techniques, right? Like that's the thing about me is I really don't consider myself a salesman. Way more important than any like sale or opportunity, I would say it's a relationship. So I think for me, I always wanted to be like, I'm genuine. I live in this neighborhood. I'm going to buy this property that you inherited from your parents. You're going to know, right? Like it's a small community. So I never want to do anyone wrong in general, but I mean, even probably more so in my hometown, right? So like, I just want to build a relationship with this guy. So if the deal fell through, or if he was like, no, I don't want to, I would rather that than him sell and be like, have seller's remorse or be like frustrated with me or, whatever. And truthfully, I still know him to this day. I mean, that was 5 years ago. We brought that property, since sold it. And he actually carries a note for the next buyer too, because he liked the setup so much. So it's kind of a long story, but it's just cool because the relationship was there.
Let's hear that, because I like that. But let's just break that down for a quick sec. Like, here it is. You speak to a stranger. You end up buying something from that stranger and giving them a valuable product. They get to be a private money lender in this case. And because you opened his eyes to that, he's still carrying the note.
Yeah. So that's exactly what happened. Actually, here's the whole story. So I host a meetup and a gentleman was there. We were talking 2 or 3 meetups later. He's like, I'm looking to buy, I have some cash. And he said, do you have anything for sale? And I said, well, I would sell this sixplex because, at that time, especially I was trying to get into syndications, which, you and I both do. So I was trying to like kind of scale a little bit. So I was like, yeah, I could use the cash from that deal. Plus at that point, I'd finally had all the units turned and up to market. So it was more valuable. And so I said, yeah, I'd probably sell that. And it was kind of a similar thing. Like he's like, okay, well, let's talk about it. So I needed to think a little bit. I went home, talked to my wife, and then I called him, the seller, and I said, hey, I have this idea where I'm going to sell it, but I want to do right by you, right? Because if you're enjoying this, and also you could have a big tax burden if I just sell it, right? So would you be interested in carrying it for another buyer? And he's like, yeah, I think so. Like, I like this monthly payment thing. I don't want this huge tax burden. So that was cool. And it's actually firepower for me as a seller. If I say, hey, I'm selling the sixplex, by the way, you don't have to get financing. This is already in place. All you have to do is come up with the cash difference, basically. So it was perfect for everyone. It was a win-win-win. So he did. We bought it. Seller's happy, buyer's happy. I was happy, and everyone kind of went on their way. And now he's owning that property and running with it. And it gave us a little cash to do like syndication stuff. So it was just kind of like you said, all in good timing. And even though it was a long way, I don't want to say that property was easy because it was a lot of work. It was just kind of this cool timing thing that worked a lot of ways.
That's really awesome. And when I tell people everybody wins in a good deal, everybody wins, this is exactly what I'm talking about.
I 100%
like nobody
believe in
lost. And so that also speaks, and you and I always end up talking about integrity and character and everything. And that's what that comes down to, is like the intention, the desire to actually take actions that will do right by others leads to these incredible outcomes.
Yeah, that is what we always talk about, because I think it's so, so valuable to talk about. I think, there are times when you could probably get ahead faster in doing some shady stuff. But I think it'll come around either like, I mean, at least it would haunt me, right? Like I wouldn't sleep as well, or eventually your reputation gets around and then maybe you got ahead faster or something by hurting someone. Absolutely not worth it, especially in the world we're in, where you have investors,
So
where you
small.
really, really hope first of all, it's a small world, but you really hope your investors are repeat investors, right? And if you do something that's cheating or lying or any of that, they're gone and you have to build a whole nother investor base. And if you tarnish your reputation, I mean, these conferences have 400 or 500 people in there and you tend to know half of that people, and if you go in long enough, I imagine you're going to know basically everybody in the room or know someone who knows someone. So it's a small enough world where, but the thing about it is, I think it's like beyond business, it's just life. It's like, just do the right thing. And I think you're just going to do better. Like it comes back around. So that's what we end up talking about a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole sleep at night factor is huge. And then,
sure.
your investors, we want our investors to be our biggest ambassadors. I think you and I are both, we represent 506B offerings, which means we can't go and proselytize over on social media and spread it around and be like, invest, choose this, did it. We can't, there is no marketing that goes involved. It's only people that we already have relationships with, even if it's, or someone we just met yesterday, that relationship has to be intact. And so, I want my investors to be so excited about what they are in and how it's performing and how myself and my team are handling it, that they're like, oh, you got to get in on this. This is amazing.
So this is funny. I can't remember who it was. I wish I remember who told me this, like early on in the journey. So I was talking about like, I'd like to change from these small multis I was buying, and I was managing them myself too. So it's a ton of work. And Jens pushed me, who we both have a mutual friend, Jens, he's my coach. He pushed me to think bigger, right? He's like, partner and do syndications, or at least think about it. So early on, I was talking to someone about it and they said, well, how do you think your reputation is? And it was like over a coffee. And I was like, well, I don't know. I've never thought about that really. He goes, because if you have a bad reputation, you're not going to do well in this industry. And it was like a ton of bricks. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. If you're not, because you're right, in a 506B situation, your investors, the term we all use is know, like, and trust you, right? So like, they all have to know you. You have to have a relationship with them. And then they need to like you and trust you. And I think the third's the most important. And so it kind of got me thinking, is like, I think I have a good reputation. I can't remember like doing anything horrible, but it really got me thinking, is like, actually, I'm glad that I didn't cheat, or again, it like comes back around. I'm glad I didn't like, do horrible stuff along the way to people and then try and like make a bunch of money or something. It doesn't work. And so it kind of weighed on me pretty heavy. And I'm just grateful that my parents, right? It was like the way I was raised is to be a good person.
Yeah. I mean, like that's just it. And some people aren't raised necessarily with the same, like, in that same environment. I think that we were raised in, where it's, that's really woven into the fabric of who you are. It's like, do what's right, golden rule, all of that. And a lot of people have this. I'm looking down here, Eric. He knows I wrote this question on my board, and I'm like, oh, I love it. I just think it's so great. And this is just the perfect segue, because it's like ego. Ego is so huge. I'm like, I should go grab Ego Is an Enemy off my stack over there, by Ryan Holiday. I always have to give a Ryan Holiday plug for whatever.
I think you do. I think it's like your jam. I mean, he's amazing.
I think it is. But I think I did it. Like every podcast episode, somehow I'm referencing like a couple authors in particular. But like keeping that ego in check is really challenging, especially for people who are starting out and they really want to get ahead. Like, quite truthfully, I was reviewing a deal recently, and I have a couple of investors that need a place to park their capital right before the end of the year. And so now you're looking at deadlines and all of that. And so anyhow, I'm reviewing a deal, and it would be very easy to just place the investor capital into that deal, and it would make me feel really great. My ego would feel really great, right? But it wouldn't be the best place for them. And I know that. So it's like, back to the drawing board, let's call the other like 6 people that like and trust that might have deals on the table.
No, that's
it's more
exactly
than
it.
6, but it's a small pool.
I think what's interesting too is like we talked about imposter syndrome a little bit last time we talked, and
Oh yeah.
I think you have this desire to not like lie, but not totally tell the truth, especially when you're starting out, meaning like pretend that you have more experience or pretend that you've done a syndication or something to that effect. And I think eventually, again, like, people can sniff it out. It's like, I would rather personally invest with someone who said, this is my first deal and I'm going to crush it for you, because I'm not going to let my first deal do bad. Right. I'd rather them say that than say, yeah, I have tons of experience, and kind of just like pull the wool over your eyes. Because it's not like you're lying. You could just say like, I have lots of experience in real estate. Like when I did my first syndication, I had a lot of experience, but they're totally different. And I think every one of my investors said, this is my first deal. And even though we have some GPs that are with us that are mentors and they have done it, you're investing with me. And I've never done this before. And in weird ways, like I think people would rather hear that than like, oh yeah, I have tons of experience. So it's the same thing as the ego. Like this is maybe just a piece of advice to a listener who's starting out. It's like, just be honest. You're new. And that's sometimes okay, because just like I said, you can be the new guy that works 10 times harder.
Okay, so many ways we could take this. And I'm going to use a personal example. It was very challenging when I first launched my podcast as Ask Me How I Know. And even I knew I wanted to launch a podcast. Everyone knows I live on the Canadian border in a rural town. I can't get to meetups. That's not me being a limiting belief. It's not something I'm going to go out of my way to do. It would take me 5 hours in the car round trip. Plus I'm like, I have Cinderella hour at 9:00, people. I got to sleep. But all that to say, I'm trying to launch a podcast in order to grow my network, to meet people. And I'm thinking, well, I have 0 experience in the syndication space. So I can't posture myself as an expert, because I am not an expert. So I was really wrestling with that concept of like, how do I do this without misleading people? Right? Because you don't want people to get the wrong impression. And so, bringing on the experts and saying like, this is the person, this person is the expert. And now I can ask all my curious questions of them.
Well, that's, I think, one of my favorite things about podcasting is like, you get to ask people who are more experienced. A lot of times people come on my show, I'm like, I'm so happy to have an hour of your time so I can ask you how you did it, how you learned, mistakes you had, all that stuff, and it's a long time for some of those people, right? Like I was so blessed to have Brandon Turner on my show. I'm like, an hour of that guy's time is worth a lot of money, or just worth his own time, right? So we get to do that. But you're right. I mean, as a podcast host, people like view you as an expert. In reality, I think what you said is super true. Is like the guest, a lot of times is way more of an expert than I am, or will be for several years, So yeah, just being honest. I mean, that's the same thing. Is like, why have the ego? Check the ego at the door and just be like, this is the person that knows is the guest, right?
This is it, because I tell my children this, but it's been true for me. And if it's, and I'm not supposed to be doing the talking. I'm supposed to like let you do the talking. You're the guest.
You're the expert now. So
no, but the truth always rises to the surface. That's my sleep at night principle is like, if you live a life that, you don't have fractures with other people where, you have problems with other people. If you don't have that, and if you go around telling the truth all the time, what are you going to say about, people gossip and people do stuff, but if not true, you can sleep at night.
Yeah. Or true. Like yeah, I can be obnoxious, for example, or, like whatever someone's going to
But
say
that's
something
true.
bad about me, it's like,
Right.
that's true. I'm working on it, or whatever. But the truth does
Yeah.
rise. And sometimes the gossip, even if it is true, you can just like, yeah, that's true about me. I'm not a super
Yep.
patient person. I'm working on it, like whatever someone's going to say bad
No,
about
I'm
me.
not working on it, and I'm not going to change that. I'm just going to be an impatient person. Deal with
Yeah,
it.
exactly. I don't have time for this. I gotta go.
That's the answer. Okay, but in all reality, like, how have you kept your ego in check throughout your journey?
It's so funny. I mean, it's just the honesty thing, right? It's like, um, just being honest that I'm new to this space. Like I'm still learning every single day. I'm still nowhere near an expert, and that's just the truth, like we said. So checking your ego, I don't know that I ever really. I mean, there was a time, like I said, where I felt this like imposter syndrome, where I was like, why am I like, even now, like, why am I on this amazing podcast? I'm so thankful to be sitting here with you. And it's not, I guess it's like, you know what, actually there's value for the things I know, or the things that we can talk about. And it's not like an ego thing. It's just like, I think I can provide value to your listeners without being like egotistical, I guess. So I'm not really sure how to answer that question. I just not something I terribly struggle with, other than like the imposter syndrome, which is, I think, very common for most people getting started.
Okay, well then let's go into that. But I'm going to put I want to drop this in there, that the first podcast that I was invited to, I literally told them my experience level. I'd say, okay, I'm very grateful. Here's my experience level. And if that's still a fit for your show, I would love to come on your show, but I want you to understand, here's my journey at this point, because like shortly after launching a podcast, all of a sudden there were these people, and I hadn't taken down my first deal yet. So it's like, I don't want to mislead your audience. And then there's that pressure. If you choose to do that, then you're putting pressure on yourself. And I think that would be uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And it's so funny too, because there's people who I've met who I say, hey, will you be on my show, on my podcast? And they'll say that. So, well, I haven't really done a deal yet. And my answer to that is, it doesn't matter at all. I mean, there's so much value in the journey. And that's what I think a lot of people want to hear, is like, if you went from like buying your first single family to a sixplex, what was that journey like? Or, hey, what's it like to get started? What's it like to brand? I mean, what's it like to do any of the stuff along the way that you have to do? And so my answer is always like, I don't care where your experience, this is just for my show, I don't want to speak for you. I don't care where your experience is. I don't care if you've done 1 deal, 0 deals, 50 deals. We'll figure out some value that we can give with your story. And there's so much value in all of those layers, because I'm sure you have listeners that like have done a lot of deals. I'm sure there's listeners that are brand new, and maybe just like have never heard the word syndication before, So it's like all across the board. I think that that's awesome to be honest and truthful. You can offer a ton of experience, no matter where, or value, no matter what your experience level.
I think people have, they doubt themselves on that. And they think that they need to be at a certain destination in order to provide value. And so then that goes into, how do you value yourself, right? Like, everything that you are going to is leaving this imprint on you that allows you to respond to the world and circumstances. So you're responding differently. Hey, you responded to the pandemic differently. It looked like you had a great time during the pandemic. So what can we learn from you? People, unfortunately, really minimize the gift that they have to give the world just by being them.
Yeah, I think, one thing about this too is like, I think people tend to do what you just said, is be like, when I'm here, I'll be happier, or when I'm here, I will be whatever. I like equate it to giving back. Like, people will say like, I like doing volunteer work, and I'm not saying everyone else has to. And I like giving a portion of our money away. It just makes me feel good. And I think everyone should do it, but only for the reason that they want to, right? So it's not like a judgment thing. But what I say is, when I hear people say, oh, well, when I make $1 million, I'll be able to give back, I encourage them to actually think of it differently. It's like, actually give a small piece of everything you make, and then it will just build the habit. And then when you have $1 million, yes, you can give more, right? But it's that same thing as like, when I'm here, I'll be here. And it's like, when I buy my first syndication, I'll be happy. It's like, enjoy the journey, because
why would you delay happiness? Why would you don't delay anything because you're so in the grind to try to get somewhere? It's like, that's not living. And then you get there.
And then
then what? You're dead? I don't know. I always say, are you racing towards death? I mean, like, really, if you're always a destination person, it's like, well, way to hurry on your life. Like, your heartbeats are a precious gift. Enjoy them.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, I think, like, Rod Cleef's story, and I've talked about this before, I think with you, like, he tells a story of him like building this mansion, and then when it was built, he was unhappy, right? So he talks about like continuing the journey and continuing to have goals to strive for, and you're never like, quote unquote, there. And so don't delay the gratification. Don't delay like the fun to be there, because there is no there. It's always just a journey. Even when you've done what you think was the craziest goal, set a higher goal and keep going, It doesn't have to be like buying stuff or doing stuff. It could be time with your family. It could be turn your phone off at 6 p.m. It could be anything that's valuable, that might be a stretch goal. Go for it. And I think that's where the true joy would be, is like in the journey, So that comes along with what you're describing, is like pretending kind of thing, or like delaying. It's just, we're in this like crazy, and like you said, every heartbeat's precious. So like, enjoy it along the way. So that's pretty cool what you said.
It is really cool. My fork in the road on that really was my dad drops dead, and he was perfectly healthy. And so, and honestly, after I was driving to the airport last weekend, and I was thinking about my journey, because I'm getting ready to meet with investors, and I was thinking about what we all think our origin story is somewhere. But when's the last time we really look at your origin story? And I like had this whole epiphany of like, wow, I mean, I've been talking about heartbeats since that moment, like how precious our lives are. And you don't know, like, somebody perfectly healthy can just be like their time, present with God, which is, like, I'm grateful for that and that peace that comes. But it's like, what's the responsibility so I'm going to ask you this question then, like, we have this responsibility to use our lives really well. We have the opportunity to cast a ripple effect in the world and to leave something behind that's extraordinary. So, how do you do that? How do you go about, volunteer work? I understand giving back, but
yeah. Well, I think it's different now because I'm a father. So it's an easier answer. It's kind of like a cheating answer. It's like, make my kids better than me. It's not me make them. It's the wrong way to say it, but make them be good. No, just like,
I will mold them.
Yeah. It's an easier answer for me, because it'd be like, hopefully I leave this world a better place. And hopefully that legacy and that integrity that we talk about is just like, my kids take that, and be amazing people. I was really blessed to do a lot of long-term mission work. When I say a lot, it was a little over a year. So it's not like forever. I have missionary friends that's their life, right? But and then now I still like to visit them. I still like to like hear what they're doing. We like to support them. And then I do like volunteer work around my hometown, because I think there's just a lot of value in that type of thing. And like I volunteer in a Boys and Girls Club, for example. It's just a really cool thing, like for kids to have a safe place to go after school, and kids to have a safe place to be in the summer. That type of thing, again, I will admit it's partially selfish, right? So I'm like sounding like, oh, I volunteer all my time, but it's because I really, really love doing that.
Right. Okay. So there's actually, it's this book. I have like a pile of books over here that speaks to that. This book, The Charge by Brendon Burchard.
I just downloaded it. No, because we talked about this. I love Brendon Burchard. I think I said this. He's like the genius of our era. And I haven't read that yet. So I literally downloaded because of you. So thank you.
That's so great. You're welcome. If anyone needs the book list of awesome books, just go to julieholly.com, scroll down and download the book list. I need to update it, by the way, but just download it now and I'll send you the updated list. Okay. But in this book, he talks about volunteering, and he talks about why most people are miserable volunteers and they just need to quit. And that as volunteers, and people trying to contribute, you actually need to find something that you are passionate about and you find joy doing, and you need to participate in that. And we label it as selfish, but why shouldn't we receive something back? Why would it be a one-way relationship?
Oh,
He goes
100%
into
agree.
far more depth.
Well,
You're going to love it.
I do think so. I do think like I was in this program in high school and I can't remember what it was. It was like, I think it was called leadership something. And we had to volunteer like 20 hours a semester or something like that. And I remember hating every moment because I had to go like pick up trash on the highway or like I remember going to like this.
You weren't wearing orange though.
Like
so.
a museum. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, I think it was wearing orange. No, I'm just kidding. But
oh yeah, the little vest thing, right? Yeah, you had the orange vest on.
or like going to like a museum and cleaning up or something. And I was volunteer and I was like, I hate this. I hate this volunteer stuff. So that's super true. I haven't read the book, like I said, but I think if you do find something that you can be passionate about, like I do, I feel a lot of passion around like the youth in my community, or we share a faith, right? So mission work for me was always something where I was like, I can go and offer something that someone physically needs or mentally needs, and then let God do the work beyond that. Cause I'm not the type to like say, I know, and you don't know, or this is what it's easier to say, here's what I think, and here's what I believe and I feel, and let God do the work, but here's how I can help you. Looks like you like the program that I really love is called Homes for Hope. And it's, they build houses, but they also educate. So people who need homes, they like start with education. They have to pass this course and they build them a home. And so my wife and I were like super lucky to be part of that for a week and go help like this group build a house. But they do it all the time. But the point is like, I am passionate about those things. So it's super easy for me to volunteer. And then it's a two-way street. Like I definitely get a ton of value and gratitude and those things. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't really feel bad saying it. Like it is a little bit selfish. Like I do those things because it makes me feel good knowing someone else is feeling good too, or getting something good.
Yeah. Feeling good. That takes me to another book by Michael Neal, but I won't go there. I'll tell you, reading changes your life, people. Just to pick up another book and read, keep reading.
Yeah. Or listen. Because truthfully, I'm not a huge reader. Yeah, but I like to listen. So even if if that's your crutch, like I'm a bad reader. Like, well,
it's a crutch.
Audible's a pretty good tool.
It's so great. So yeah, actually, when I say read a book, I ingest a book.
Yeah.
Ingest a book because I am like, do your thing, people. What is that? I'm agnostic when it comes to how you're going to read your book.
Oh yeah, exactly. However you can get it. If you
literature agnostic, just somehow engage it.
I'll tell this one story really quick. So my wife and I, this is a crazy long story. So I'm going to tell the part that I'm trying to get at. We took a year off and we traveled for a year, and I drove literally the entire time. It was 28,000 miles. We drove this little camper, and my wife would sit and read. And so she would be like an audiobook in person.
She would read to you.
She would read aloud. Yeah. So we would read books together on this journey. And I was just listening to her read, and she was just sitting there reading. Oh, it was so cool. Yeah. I mean, so we actually drove from Colorado to the bottom of Patagonia. So like all the way through South America. So again, that's a very long story. We can talk offline, but
that's extraordinary.
Along the way, we like selected some books, and the camper we had didn't have like a radio because it was super old. And so she would just read books aloud. So however you can get it, however you can ingest the book, if you have to ask your wife to read it, that's even a good tool too.
Oh, I love it. Okay. So since we're talking about books and we need to wrap up, I hate wrapping up, and you have this long layover. And so it's like, we could continue, but I can't. So, but let's talk about books. Let's just say top book that has left, and it could be, you just read it, just finished it, could be something, whenever it was, like one book that it was just like kapow in your life.
Okay. I think High Performance Habits, again, Brendon Burchard's, he's just so good. So one is like, it's harder to answer with just one. So I'll leave it with that.
Okay. No, that's fine. No. No, give us the other, because they hear me talking about High Performance Habits all the time.
So I think Hunter Thompson's book is really, really good for syndication, raising capital for real estate. It's just like a tool.
Bible.
It is, but
It's the Bible of capital raising.
but it's also beyond that. Like he talks about all the other parts of syndication as well. So even if you're a passive investor, I'd highly encourage you to read that book because you would learn all about the business, learn about what it looks like, how to find a good sponsor. I mean, all that stuff's in there. So
Yeah.
great book for passive investors as well. So I'll leave it those two. I think those two recently made a big impact.
I love it. And I had the audio version of his book, and then I had the paperback because I have to have my tangible fix, so I can underline. And then something happened and it got, buggered up. I think it got rained on. Like somehow it dropped out of something and it got rained on. And so then I bought another copy. So that's how dedicated I am to that.
It's so
material.
good. It's so good. Yeah, his like
good,
online tools and stuff. I mean, yeah, he's definitely, I think he's ahead of his time when it comes to like using technology too. So anyway, I could talk about the book for a long time, but definitely an excellent one.
Okay, Eric, we have to say goodbye. But before we do, it's so sad. Before we say goodbye, let's let everybody know where can they connect at. What is your favorite place for people to reach you and connect you if it's same or different?
Cool. Everything's on wildoakcapital.com. So the podcast is there, which is my podcast is focused on mindset. And that's why Julie and I, we could talk for hours and hours. And
we could talk for hours probably just because we're talkers, but
we talk about mountain biking for hours.
Yes, we could.
And my email is eric@wildoakcapital.com, but you can see all that on the website. And then I'm on social media stuff. So again, everything is just like wildoakcapital.com and connect with me. I truly love to connect with people. So even if it's just, you just want to ask a few questions, definitely reach out.
So make sure you connect up because Eric is really awesome. What I consider just one of the, it's just really great and refreshing when you meet people where it's like, if I wasn't investing in my own stuff, I'd be like, here, Eric, you can have my money.
Vice versa. To all your listeners, you guys put your money with Julie. Don't put a deadline on it though. Let her get a good deal.
Yeah. Oh, no, I only have good deals. Because you build your reputation.
I know.
Yeah, exactly. You build your reputation.
Don't push the timeline. Just wait till a good one comes along. Put your money with Julie. This is super cool. I mean, I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you again so much for having me on your show. This is crazy. It is a bummer we have to go, but it's a reality, right?
It is a reality of life. So thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Julie.
And to all my awesome listeners, you're amazing. And I appreciate you supporting the show. So please, until next time, live big, love bigger. If you're embarrassed to answer the question, what are you reading? Or you're looking for a community to read with, the 5-Week Book and Networking Club is for you. The 5-Week Book and Networking Club helps readers of all kinds grow, learn, and connect with others in a really meaningful way. There's no commitment. Join the group book by book. If you're the person known for not finishing the books you start, or maybe you're a self-proclaimed slow reader or can't decide which book to read next, join us. I provide a reading schedule broken into 5 simple days of reading with an average of 7 pages a day. Reading is such a powerful way to expand your thinking, understanding, and skill base. And reading with the 5-Week Book and Networking Club will also build your network and affect your business. In 2021, the 5-Week Book and Networking Club completed 8 books and 40 weeks of reading and networking. Head over to julieholly.com to connect so you don't miss out on the next book.